Welcome, welcome. Hey, I thought, Jackie, we'd talk about things that go wrong.
Oh my God, I got a list for you.
Yeah, so do I. Good. And what spurred this was, I don't know if you saw it this week, but lawyers, title, and I think it's fidelity. They're all under the same umbrella. There's about four or five of them, right? And Tuesday, nationwide, their system went down. They couldn't close. They're telling people
Ah.
we may be able to close on Monday. Now, this is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. You know, people had moving vans loaded up, ready to go on Tuesday and Wednesday to
Oh,
get in their new
absolutely.
house before Thanksgiving. And now, I mean,
Imagine the people that had simultaneous closes, whether at the same title company or not the same title company. And if they closed and had to be out of their house, and then suddenly they can't close on their house, were they in hotels? Is there any kind of liability that's going to fall on the title company? I mean, I'm sure it cost a lot of people some decent amount of money.
yeah, and those are always tricky moves. I know I had one once that, the first house they sold closed in the morning and then immediately wired the money over to close that afternoon. And, we had a couple of delays and it can just get ugly.
Hmm.
Um, there's always something that goes wrong. Not every time, but
No.
you get surprised by some of the things that pop up. I know you have a couple of examples.
Oh my gosh. So absolutely. So I've had situations where well, here's the worst one. And this is many, many years ago, when we would, ever since COVID, everybody does the mobile notary, but it used to be common practice and always practice that you would meet your client at the title company and close at the title company and sign the docs and be there with your client. Years ago, I'm talking like 18, 20 years ago, both myself and my mother, we had some clients that we were meeting at the title company for their closing. We got there, we're sitting there, we're talking to the escrow officer, we're waiting, and we represented the sellers. And the sellers didn't show up. And then nobody could reach the sellers. We were calling them. I don't even think they had cell phones. We were calling their home phone, I believe. And lo and behold, it actually took 2 days. They just went MIA. We went by the house. They had moved out of the house already, couldn't locate them. Come to find out, and this is horrific, they had been in a car accident and they both passed away.
Oh man.
Hmm.
The deal's dead then. I mean, nobody can sign anything. And
Actually, it took about 4 months and they had to go through probate, but the children, I think it was the daughter and her husband, uh, she was the executor of the will. And eventually those buyers, they rented a short-term rental and they actually bought the house, still bought the house, but it took about 4 months because they had to go through probate. But, it was
well, you know,
sad. It was, I
I
mean, for 2 days, we didn't even know what happened to the
yeah,
sellers. They
I'll
were
bet.
just MIA.
I had a buyer once that was just mad. She didn't do any of the repairs that she agreed to do. I found out the day before she was divorced. Her husband finally drove up there and fixed everything, and she was just mad that was going to have to be done, even though we agreed on everything. And she just decided on the day of closing, she had an appointment for 10 o'clock, and she said, "I'm not going. I have a
Oh,
doctor's appointment."
oh
And I
my
had this
God.
doctor's appointment for months. And I said, "Well," and I'd had it with her at this point. And I said, "It's up to you." I said, "But the buyers are going to walk away if you're not there in an hour." So she went and signed. And the
Yeah.
title company told me she was just nasty to everybody. It was right around on the Cinco de Mayo, I remember, because I
Oh, Lord.
delivered a whole bunch of tequila to all the ladies that were in the title office as an apology. But there's always something that can come up. I know I like to schedule closings on a Thursday. I know a lot
Absolutely.
of agents like
Wednesday,
to do it on
even.
Friday. Wednesdays or Thursdays are great because
Yeah.
if you have a delay, at least you're not delayed until Monday.
Right. Right.
So if something goes wrong on Wednesday, you can close on Thursday. You might have to stay in a motel, tell the moving truck, hey, stick around. But boy, if there's a problem on Friday, you're toast until Monday. So I really
Oh, yeah.
recommend for viewers out there, don't close on Fridays. That's rough.
Never. I've had some real doozies, Rick. Back when we had the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, and people were really mad giving up homes. I had many situations to where I represented the buyer. We would go in and the appliances would be gone, or there would be holes in the wall. I had one person, we went to do the final walkthrough, and there was the most hideous smell. And I know many sellers did this, unfortunately. Fish in the walls.
Oh,
Oh, it was hideous. But I mean, I even had a scenario just recently. So I represented a buyer that was buying a home in Chandler, a second home, and unfortunately, the repairs didn't get done until the day prior to close of escrow. And he was flying in. He wanted to be in person to actually sign. So we moved closing by one day. So he gets here, and while he's on the plane, I'm doing the final walkthrough because I had just got notification that the repairs were done. And so I get there to do the final walkthrough, and I'm looking at the repairs, and the seller's agent, they had hired one of those Binzer repair companies. So we had bronze fixtures in the bathroom. I'm sorry, gold fixtures in the bathroom, and the fixtures that had to be replaced were replaced with silver. I had all the staging furniture was still in the house. There was a hole above the microwave that they were supposed to seal because this was a complete remodel, right? Really nice remodel job they did. And so of course we're expecting that the repairs that get done are going to be the same quality of the remodel that they did because they did a great job. So I get there, and there was supposed to be a panel put above the microwave where the vent used to be because insulation was coming through the top. So instead of putting a panel, they had duct taped it. I mean, I was like, are you kidding me? And then they were supposed to repair the stairs, and the cord to pull the stairs down was gone. So I couldn't, for the attic. So I couldn't pull the stairs down to check that. So my client gets off a plane. He's on the way to the title company. I'm sending him videos. I'm like, there are numerous repairs that aren't done correct. So I told the escrow officer, stop, don't record, because they were going to record that afternoon right after he signed. Got a hold of the seller's agent, and they had plumbers there and contractors there that night, and we were luckily able to record the next day, but he had to get a hotel that night. I mean, there's so many situations that can happen.
yeah. There's a lot of. I mean, emotions run high too, and you get the 1 or 2 days before closing. And I know with one of the iBuyers out there, we're selling a house in Fountain Hills, and they were assuring me that the repairs that we had requested had been done. And I drove down to the house, and nothing had been done. And then they finally said, "Yeah, we sent a vendor out there, and he took care of it." And I called him. I said, "You better not trust this vendor because they didn't even wire it right correctly." And finally, I just said, "Give me a credit at close of escrow so my guy can hire the right people to get this done." But those things come up like right at the last minute. And
Oh
then
yeah.
I had one. So I guess what we're saying in this video is be prepared because you never know. And I had one where my seller had moved out, and they hadn't moved out yet. They leased back for a few weeks from this buyer. They were the
Mm-hmm.
nicest couple and everything. They wrote one of those letters. Our kids want to grow up in the neighborhood and everything. And so when they went to move in, the agent never did a pre-closing walkthrough. So there was no sign off on
Big
anything.
mistake.
Big mistake. So when they went to move in, they found a hole in a door. Now that hole had been there for,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, quite a few years, a little tiny hole. The guy wanted $200 for the door, or he wasn't going to close. And I'm thinking, we just put in a brand new air conditioning for you. You know, we did all these other things, and you guys didn't find that hole when you did the. Did you do a pre-closing walkthrough? She goes, "Well, no." I said, "Well, this my
Did they
client says
ask
that
for it
that's
during
been
the
there."
inspection period?
No, no,
Oh,
didn't
jeez.
ask for it. And so anyway, the seller was furious. The buyer was furious, and he said, "I want $200 from the seller for the door." And I said, "Well, you can't demand that where the money comes from. If you're looking for $200 for repairs, you don't get to say, nope,
Right.
I want it to come from him." So finally, I'm getting a hold of the agent, and I said, let's just make this go away. I'll kick in 100, you kick in 100. She goes, well, I don't know. He wants $200 from the seller, and she was a
Oh
new
Lord.
agent. I said, we have to solve this in 15 minutes, or I'm calling your broker.
Oh my gosh. So crazy. And
It's
it's hard too when you've got an inexperienced agent on the other side. So I'm going to give you two more really good stories. So I'm going to save the best for the last. Wait till you hear this one. So I had one about a year and a half ago. Ruby and I actually represented the buyer and the seller. We originally had the listing. And so when we got a interested party, the buyer, Ruby and I will separate so that we can do dual agency and make it very fair. So she represented the buyer, I represented the seller. And this buyer was just crazy is the best word I can come up with. So anyways, they needed to do the final walkthrough and they had asked for a huge long laundry list of repairs. One of the repairs that had to be done was it was a tri-level home and there was a crawl space that you could access behind the refrigerator in the kitchen to get to the crawl space underneath the dining room, which was like the second kind of, it was, you had your basement, then you had a couple steps up, not basement, but the tri-level. So it's a couple steps down, a couple steps up to like where the dining and the living and the kitchen is, and then upstairs to the house, right? So there was a crawl space under the dining room, and they were supposed to fix a beam under there. Now, we got it fixed. We had pictures. We had a structural engineer who signed off, paid invoice, photos, everything, right? So the buyer meets me at the house because Ruby was unavailable to do the final walkthrough. We're going through the house. From the second he walked in the door, he's like touching the window seals, going, "There's dust in this house. Why is there dust in this house?" And he's like, "The carpets haven't been vacuumed." I'm like, "You can see the vacuum lines. I knew the sellers. They had cleaned the house very nicely." But he found dust like on the blinds. So, anyways, I'm talking to the wife and we're standing in the family room. And the next thing I know, I turn around, he's pulled out the refrigerator and there is a panel that's sealed, right? And because when they did the repair, they put the panel and they sealed it and bolted it. He's pulled out the panel and tore the wall apart and is crawling into the crawl space because he wants to see for himself that the beams are fixed.
oh,
So now I got a hole in the wall. Then he looks at me and he says, "I want the sellers to pay to have that repaired." I'm like, "You just tore it out. Are you kidding me?" Long story short, Ruby and I split it. We ended up paying for it. It was ridiculous. I mean, the guy just literally tore the panel off it and ripped the sides of the wall when he took it off.
people's personalities change through a transaction, don't they? Really
Oh my
nice.
God.
I had a buyer from Tempe, he was like the nicest guy in the world. He was from somewhere back east, I mean, another country, and and then he says, I'm not going to ask for anything to be repaired when we write the offer on this house. I go, okay, well, had the inspection. There were quite a few things, but nothing major. And he wanted 20,000. I go, you what? I want 20,000. I want you to take 20,000 off the price. Have them credit me 20,000. I said, we don't even have 20,000 in repairs. I'm going to have to itemize this for you. Well, you need
Yeah.
to make it look like 20,000. I said, well, I can't lie. I mean,
Right.
if you want, I said, I think the most, if I were to go full retail, might be $12,000, might be nine, but he insisted. And I had to say, I'll see how we can do this. In the meantime, we had a problem with the him verifying that he was an Arizona resident and he couldn't get the mortgage. And the lender said, and he ran a bunch of convenience stores. She says, every time I ask him for an address and he gives it to me, it's a convenience store. She goes, I can't put this loan through. Right 3 days before we're supposed to close, the sellers moved out. He couldn't get financing. We had to, cancel the contract. And he said he was going to sue me if I couldn't get his earnest money back. Now he got his earnest money back, but he turned into the meanest,
Oh
nastiest
my
guy
gosh.
I had ever met. And he actually called me and he said, well, I'm sorry this didn't work out. I'll be ready to buy next year and I'm going to give you a call. And I said, I'll give you a referral.
Yeah, really. Oh my Lord. All right. You want to hear my worst one?
Yep.
Okay. So years ago, before my mom passed away. She passed away about 17 years ago, but we were partners for about 15 years, and she had been in the business forever. So, my specialty is horse property. So there was a large ranch in Cave Creek on 10 acres. At the time, now this quite a while ago, uh, I believe it was listed at 3.5 million. Big, big, beautiful ranch, right? So I used to do a lot of the horse shows, and I got a referral by one of the top Arab trainers. I won't say his real name. We'll say Jack. And anyways, he had a gentleman that he was going to marry that was coming from Texas and very well off. And I'll say Tom is his name. Anyways, so Tom and Jack, I show properties to, right? And we find this big, beautiful ranch, put it under contract for $3.5 million. And we go through all the inspections, and there were some structural issues with this house. Uh, the what's the rich guy? Is that Jack? Tom and Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, so the guy with all the money, right? He dresses galore. He's got the best boots, the best hats. He drives the biggest truck. He buys the husband a brand new truck while we're in escrow for cash. This is a cash deal, right? Has proof of funds. He had put a $50,000 earnest deposit down when we went under contract, right? By via wire. So we were under contract for months because there were some structural issues, and the sellers had to pay to get a bunch of structural repairs done to the house before he would close, right? We are down to like 4 or 5 days prior to closing. And all of a sudden I get a call from the husband who says, "Oh my God, they repossessed my truck this morning." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "They repossessed my truck this morning. And I can't find Tom." Tom is the rich cowboy, right? Can't find Tom anywhere. Now, Tom has already been to the title company. I'm sorry, we were only about 2 or 3 days away from closing because he had already been to the title company and had already signed and had already wired funds. The funds were there, right? $3.5 million sitting at the title company. And the husband's telling me how they repossessed his truck. He can't find his husband. He doesn't know what's going on. I get a call from the title company that says the funds they've been there for a couple days, but the wire was fraudulent.
Oh,
It took months for the title company to find out that $50,000 earnest deposit, it sat there for months and nobody knew it was fraudulent. Anyways, long story short, the guy had actually, it was a vacant house. The guy had been staying at the house when he was in fights with the husband. All his mail was going to the house. He had done something to where somehow a lien got put on the house for a couple $100,000 that he didn't even own yet. It was the guy ended up in jail. He was they found him. He was arrested. He went to jail. I think like 7, 8 years, something like that. But we spent 4 months, and the guy was just a jerk. He was verbally abusive to my mother. Like he would scream at her and treat her like she was an idiot. Like he just was very arrogant. And we put up with it, but yeah. So 4 months, $3.5 million deal. And that guy, everything about him was fraudulent.
see, and that's a hard thing to verify too, because you probably saw bank records, you probably saw a statement, he gave you
He
proof of funds.
wired the funds. The
Yes, that,
title company, the title company had wires and received funds. They couldn't even explain what happened until they were contacted by the police.
wow, very interesting. Well, I guess the
It was
bottom line is there's a
crazy.
lot of things that go on in a transaction, and a lot of times buyers and sellers don't even see
Yeah,
that we see that we try to put the fires out before you have to make that phone call. And
right.
sometimes you're just on the phone, you're back and forth, and I can't believe I'm seeing this. I can't believe I'm hearing this. Let's get this fixed before I have to make a phone call. So then sometimes you can, at the end of the transaction, go, I can tell you now, but it's,
Oh yeah,
it's
for sure. I just had one like that, and it's like, the ones I'm telling you about with the sellers dying, and the guy from Texas. I mean, those are far and few between. I've had two incidences that were horrific like that in my 34 years, but I just had one where we had two transactions together. So I represented the buyer. We were selling her house as well, and the we also had the buyer buying her house. So it was three transactions. That buyer was actually contracted, and he was going back and forth between German and Poland and all this stuff. And so we had three transactions that were kind of all tied together. And the guy had somehow he had wired the money to the wrong place. Like there was four or five incidences that had happened that could have made that transaction fall apart. My buyer seller never knew any of it. We got it all fixed. And then at the end, I told her, I'm like, this is all the things that had happened. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't tell me. I'm like, why was I going to stress you? I just needed to fix everything.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That happens more times than people know. So it's interesting. Well, I'm glad you shared some of those stories. And like I said, I think there's you have to be mentally prepared when you're buying or selling a home, not to be negative and say, well, something's going to go wrong, but you need to be on top of it. And you need to communicate with your agent and expect anything because you just never know what can happen. A lot of them just go really smoothly. We've had several that just you go, I can't believe how easy this was, and how great it was. But
mhm.
us agents, we only get paid for unlocking doors. So
Right,
um,
right. If people really only knew.
yeah, that's right. Well, Jackie, good to talk to you again. Have a great day, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Rick.